Almost 300 years ago, a devil sailed the seas off the coast of America. He was the most drunken pirate in the Caribbean. No ship was safe from his men, no sailor safe from his sword. This is the story of a man whose entire career as a pirate lasted only a couple of years, but in that short period he gained such a reputation for merciless villainy that he's still now remembered as the most famous pirate of them all.
Ah! The seas run red with thine accursed Yorkshire blood. And if that didn't work, I set fire to my beard.
His name, of course, was...
After that, they was like butter to a hot knife.
I'm sure it was. He was, of course...
Lambs to the slaughter, some might say.
Do you mind?
I'm sorry, Jim lad. Fearsome habit.
His name, in case you haven't guessed already, was Blackbeard. That wasn't his real name, that was his nickname. In fact, a lot of pirates had nicknames. There was Blackbeard, Bluebeard, Calico Jack, Jake the Peg, the list goes on. Blackbeard's real name was Edward Teach, and he was born in Bristol in 1680. Back then, Spain controlled much of Mexico and the Caribbean and was making a fortune from their gold and silver mines. As Spain banned any other country from trading with its colonies, England, along with many others, took the view that they could attack Spanish ships and nick the stuff instead. Young Blackbeard grew up in a Bristol obsessed with the riches of the New World, and like most boys of the town, it's likely he'd watched the ships leaving port, wishing he could join them on their adventures, and sometime in the early 17th century, he did.
Captain! Aye, aye! All the way down to
Davy Jones's locker, a king's ransom in gold, and not a man left to tell the tale, except me, naturally.
So how long after that did you actually become a pirate?
Oh, not for years. Off, kids! Moron! If I take your other leg off. Privateers is what we was called that. Privateers, lovely employed by the Queen and country to roam the seven seas and rob, pillage, and otherwise render any unfriendly vessel, how should I put it, humanly untenable. Drink.
And you reckon all this was strictly legal?
Sea's a big place, mate. But in answer to your question, yes, it was legal. Have a look at this. So there. Royal approval. It's got a stamp to prove it.
Blackbeard didn't start out as a pirate. First, he was what's known as a privateer. Being a tad skint, the English could never raise enough money to have a navy large enough to rule the seas. So, instead, they issued these, letters of marque, a royal licence which allowed rich men to build their own ships to attack England's enemies, making a profit from what they could pillage. It sounds mad, but it's fair to say that the whole basis of English sea power was built on the legalised piracy created by the privateers. Hard thugs doing the dirty work and rich men paying the bills. And what a profit they made, for example. It was the merchants of Bristol who financed the voyages of John and Sebastian Cabot, and in 1708 it was the Bristol merchants who got the money together for a plundering expedition around the world. In 1711, when the ships returned, they had £800,000 worth of treasure. But it wasn't called piracy, no, it was called private enterprise. But then, in 1713, the party was suddenly over with the signing of the Treaty of Utrecht. Bashing the Spanish was no longer on, and that meant no work for the privateers.
Aye, and no social security in them days, Jim lad. So you tell me, what's the bloke to do?
Teach decided to follow the only path he knew and became a fully fledged pirate when he joined the crew of the infamous Captain Hornigold.
What you looking at?
the most feared and merciless pirate ever to sail the Spanish Main. It was at this moment that Edward Teach decided to change his name.
So, Mr. Blackbeard, done any pillaging recently?
Yes, no, yes, no.
Any good, are we?
The best.
Piracy was the obvious next step for the successful privateer. The pirate ships operated in the same waters the privateers had sailed, and their experience and local knowledge of reefs, currents, sandbars and islands made natural pirates out of many ex-privateers.
This is Albemarle Sound. It's an ideal place for us to careen the ship. And all along this coast, there's places for us to collect supplies and to hide wherever we might go.
Blackbeard took to pirating like a fish to salt water. According to Goss's History of Piracy, as an eager young hand aboard Hornigold's pirate ship, Edward Teach showed that he had a marksman's eye, an ability at dirty infighting, and a thirst for blood unmatched by any pirate of his time. It wasn't long before Hornigold gave him a ship of his own, which he renamed the Queen Anne's Revenge. After that, the pair of them wreaked havoc up and down the Spanish Main.
Them were the days.
Life was actually more agreeable on a pirate ship than it was in the Royal Navy. It was more democratic. Pirates could vote their respective captains out of office, and did on a regular basis, whereas in the Navy they might not have had to wear a uniform, but the discipline was harsh and often brutal.
Ready, Mr. Booth?
Aye, sir.
I proceed.
The cat-o'-nine-tails keeping the men focused on their job. But on a pirate ship, it was the money that kept the crew in check, every man knowing that he was entitled to an equal share of the prize. For a while, it seemed that the pirates had a country almost to themselves. Well, not a country, but an island, Providence Island, here in the Bahamas. It had first been settled by the English in the 1640s, but it had been raided so many times by the Spanish that the final governor legged it in 1704, leaving it wide open for the pirates. So between 1713 and 1718, this was in effect Treasure Island, with up to 1,000 pirates living here and nobody upholding the law.
It's a pirate's life for me, mate.
Still, it wouldn't leave much time for family life.
Not with me being a married man at all.
You were married then?
Once or twice.
In fact, although he had a wife and a family back in England, Blackbeard got married 14 times in all.
I now pronounce you my man and wife. You may now kiss the bride.
From this to the sparrow, boys.
Blackbeard had a soft spot for beautiful women, and by all accounts, they didn't find him too repellent either. He must have had something about him, or else 14 different women wouldn't have married him. And that was the funny thing about Blackbeard. He might have been the most frightening thing ever to sail the seas, but deep down, he was a party animal, loved by his crew and virtually every woman he met.
Room for a lad who sailed the seas.
Hey, jolly room, boys.
And I must gladly take his ease.
Hey, jolly room, boys.
From Avonmouth to the Spanish Main.
Hey, jolly room, boys.
I sailed the seas and back again, so therefore give me room, boys. So listen, boys, and I'll tell no lie.
Hey, jolly room, boys.
And if I do, may I rot and die. Excuse me, boys, whilst I shed a tear. For all the ships that sail on the sea.
Hey, jolly room, boys.
They shall never have a crew such as thee. So therefore give me room, boys!
But it wasn't all fun and games. 6'5" tall, with a blood-curdling appearance. The black beard, which covered half his face and grew down to his waist, was only part of the image. Before going into battle, he would often set fire to small fuses of gunpowder in his hair and beard, the ensuing smoke giving him the appearance of the devil incarnate.
Finest trick I ever learned, barring the occasional experimental accident.
Blackbeard was well aware of his image and did everything he could to enhance it. The blacker, the better, as far as he was concerned. In the 18th century, sailors were highly superstitious, and many victims and pirates alike believed that Blackbeard was the devil. At the peak of his powers, his reputation was so terrifying that whole crews would lay down their arms and surrender or simply flee in terror at the merest hint of his arrival. But this primitive psychological warfare wasn't only directed at his enemies. He liked to scare the wits out of his crew too. One tale tells about how he took 3 of them into the hold and set fire to some brimstone. Now, what is brimstone, I hear you ask? Nothing more than sulphur, one of the chief ingredients of gunpowder. It won't explode,